Our clients don't buy translation because they want a translation. They want to be able to solve a problem in a geography and in a language landscape they don't know. A million words might be less impactful than a text of 10 words. You get the more honest answers to anything at a informal event like LocLunch.
Hello and welcome to the channel. Today we are joined by someone who brings sharp strategy and deep community spirit to the localization industry. Daniel Sebesta is a Czech linguist, a certified pricing professional, and the force behind more than a dozen LocLunch meetups across Europe and North America. He's helped LSPs rethinking pricing in the age of AI and reminds us that sometimes the most powerful ideas don't come from webinars or boardrooms. They come from lunch tables. Let's dive into it. Daniel, let me ask it outright. Is per word pricing holding our industry back? And if so, what's replacing it?
That's a very good question. Per word pricing has been so deeply ingrained in the industry that few people actually seriously question it. It might be holding us back. It might be holding us, it might be keeping us in a mindset that is not extremely helpful. And that is the mindset where we calculate prices for translation and related services purely based on the cost that it takes to produce them. And cost is a very important a very important element in any pricing calculation, in any pricing strategy, but it should not be the only element in that calculation. And most notably, what's missing from any cost-based pricing, such as per word pricing, is the notion of value. The price, at any price calculated purely based on the number of words multiplied by a per word rate that is kind of static across projects, across clients, in many cases, across languages, even in some cases. It completely disregards the value of the translation that the buyer of the service is able to extract from it. And, there are types of content that have a very short shelf life. They're useful in the moment, but not for much longer than that. And there are others that are very high impact and high visibility and also high risk. And it's probably not a good practice to price each of these extremes. And it's a spectrum, of course, with everything in the middle. It's probably not a good practice to price all these steps on the scale the same way with the per word price or rate.
Many LSPs try to add value, but end up over-delivering and undercharging. What's a pricing trap you see over and over again when you help LSPs to find the right model?
I think many LSPs over-deliver and undercharge because of competitive pressure. There are other LSPs, right? It's a very fragmented industry. There are so many close competitors that any one of us has, and there is competitive pressure on pricing. LSPs often choose to locate their production in lower cost countries to be able to sustain a lower price, and that undercuts the price for everyone. So I think the undercharging often comes from these competitive pressures, but also, and again, the completely missing notion of value, the value that we're creating with our work for our customers. And that is not necessarily based on the number of words, because a text of a million words might be less impactful than a text of 10 words.
What would you say is value for you? in translation?
Our clients don't buy translation because they want a translation. They want to be able to talk to someone. They want to be able to solve a problem in a geography and in a language landscape they don't know. And translations or localization services or what have you allow them to do that. They allow them to achieve some kind of business objective, or when an individual buys a translation, say a certified translation of a birth certificate, they are not buying it to have a translation. They're buying it because some kind of official process requires it, right? And so the value created is the ability to navigate this administrative process. The value of a commercial translation for a B2B client is the ability to sell whatever they are trying to sell in a new geography to a new client that they wouldn't be able to address otherwise. So that is value, being able to talk to somebody you would not be able to talk to otherwise, being able to sell to somebody you wouldn't be able to sell to otherwise, being able to navigate an administrative process in a foreign country, and being able to do that friction-free and in a timely manner and in a language that is received positively, that is received well. So that is the value, and that is something LSPs need to communicate more than just looking at the number of words and competing strictly on price with other LSPs.
This is another question. What's one pricing model or approach that excites you, but that most people are still afraid to try?
So something that excites me is the notion of subscriptions, and I still don't have a very clear idea myself as a pricing consultant how that should look like and how it could work in the translation world. But subscriptions are something that is ubiquitous in so many areas of our lives nowadays. Of course, when I was growing up, there were subscriptions for newspapers and magazines, and that was about it, right? And then later on, we got subscriptions for phones, and it was no longer paid per unit used. And then we got subscriptions for data and what have you. This has expanded dramatically in the last 5 to 10 years. In some countries, you can now subscribe to coffee deliveries. You can subscribe to shaving supplies, and they will be delivered to you on a monthly basis. So the conclusion from that, or the learning from that, is the general population, and this applies to consumers, this applies to businesses, is kind of primed to be receptive to pricing that is based on subscriptions. And of course, one of the beautiful things about subscriptions is you don't have to worry about each and every unit. And that works for the buyer, and that works for the seller too. And it for sellers, it ensures recurring revenue, which is something very useful to have, at least as a baseline revenue that you can sort of count on every month or every week or however frequently your subscriptions renew. And it's also welcome for the buyers because they can also time and forecast their spending. And this is something that we could make work potentially in the language industry on a larger scale. I know some LSPs are already experimenting with it. The problem with that for a wide-ranging adoption in the language industry is with the human component, there is still this limit, right? A single person can only translate so much or review, post edit so much in a day, and the cost to them is clearly aligned, clearly depends on the number of words or the volume of the translation. So an unlimited subscription that is not just machine translation, that is not just technology. It's difficult to make work in the language industry, but with a technology component to it, it is probably a viable pricing model. And I think we will see more and more LSPs experimenting with it. And I think we will see more and more buyers at least tentatively asking if that would be an option.
What would be the part of a translator in this kind of subscription models?
That is the unresolved question that I still have. To what extent can you involve a translator in subscription pricing model for translation? Obviously, the core of any unlimited subscription model will have to be a technology solution, which may or may not include an add-on involving professional humans, and that will always be capped at some level. You might get an unlimited subscription to a custom built translation engine, but the human component, the human review, the post editing after quality estimation and automatic post editing have been done, for example, that would be the role that a human translator would play in a translation workflow that is priced as a subscription.
Got you. You spent years thinking deeply about pricing and what we are talking about, but these conversations, how do they link with LocLunch? You are an ambassador yourself, been doing LocLunch ambassadorship around the world. Now you are in Prague. This year you have 3 LocLunches done in Prague, but you have started in the US. How did the conversations on these tables influenced you in your pricing strategy thinking? And what happens on the LocLunches?
Yeah. So I have always tried to be very inclusive with my LocLunches. You know, I come from translation. I started out in the industry as a translator, and I was always part of communities of translators and gathering of translators. And I thought when I was first introduced to the concept of LocLunch back in 2019, I thought this is so much more. This is not just translators talking about language problems and dealing with their clients, etc. This could be much broader. And the place where I was, Rochester, New York, when I was first introduced to LocLunch, also called for that broader approach because I did not immediately know any practicing linguists in the area, but I did know several LSPs and the owners of these LSPs. And so that's how I started building the community there in upstate New York around LSPs, but at the same time coming from the translator, freelance translator side at that time. So that was already 2 perspectives, right? And I realized at that time that I had actually been kind of longing for a venue like that where LSPs and translators could exchange ideas and thoughts openly, honestly, in an informal atmosphere. And that is exactly what LocLunch was able to offer as a format. And so that was the 2 key perspectives that I sought to bring together, but it's broader still, right? And since 2019, the importance of technology has only been increasing in our industry. And naturally, I wanted to bring more technology people in. And I'm not sure if I ever succeeded at that, particularly in Rochester, but certainly here in Prague, in the Czech Republic, we have the broader community that includes a lot of people that build technology for the language industry or deploy technology or integrate technology in business processes. And they're not necessarily linguists, they're not necessarily founders of LSPs or even employees of LSPs, but they specifically work on technology. So that's the third key component that I try to bring together with LocLunch. And back to your question, how that has influenced my thinking about pricing in the industry. I'm not sure how many of the conversations at LocLunch specifically revolve around pricing, but attending an event or events, a series of events with such a broad range of people, it broadens your horizons in general. And even if the conversations are not specifically about pricing as something that is particularly interesting for me, it still gives you the big picture of the industry, much more so than attending a translator's gathering, or much more so than attending something that is specifically designed for LSPs, or something that is specifically about machine translation or technology. But bringing all of this together, that is what has certainly shaped my thinking about pricing, marketing in our industry, about strategy overall, about how to prepare for the future, etc.
What's something you've learned at a LocLunch that you never would have learned on a conference stage?
I don't know. At a conference, people tell you what they think is presentable, right? What's for the public eye, and what they're proud of, and they will not so readily share the failures, the fuck ups, second thoughts they had about a decision, etc. So I can't think of anything specific immediately, but I have always had the experience from translators gatherings early on, and later from LocLunch certainly, that people will tell you a lot more about their business or line of work over beer than they ever would at a conference. And I go to conferences too, valuable, don't get me wrong, but I still think you get the more honest answers to anything at a informal event like LocLunch.
Got you. Got you. Daniel, what would you recommend a young person entering our industry? Is it a good moment to enter the localization industry for you? What would be your recommendation for this person?
It's a very interesting, I would even say intriguing moment to enter the industry. I would not give a recommendation without reservation, without caveats, because translation, now if we're talking about language work, what translators do, not so much the other roles in LSPs, but translators, that job has historically attracted a certain kind of people with a certain set of skills, with a certain set of interests, and maybe that is no longer viable. It's still a promising career, but for somebody different than 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago, perhaps. It involves a lot more technology nowadays, and that is not something the mainstream translator of 20 years ago was looking for necessarily in their career. And many, if not most roles, it also requires a whole lot of entrepreneurship, problem solving. It's much broader now than it perhaps used to be. It's not just language work. And so the requirements to be successful in the industry, and certainly as a translator or linguist, are quite different from what they were back when I started, or even further back in the past. So yes, I think it can still be a very viable career, a promising line of business, but it requires a different set of expectations now.
You have heard it. Daniel, thank you for sharing both your pricing wisdom, your passion for community building, and for being with me today here on the show. Whether you're running a language company, freelancing, or just rethinking how you work, remember this: your pricing tells the world how you value your work, and your community reminds you why it matters. If you gave you a new question to ask about how you charge, how you connect, and how you grow, then we did a good job, Daniel. Links to his profile and work in the description below. And if you're building something in this space, let us know in the comments, or better yet, over LocLunch. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.